As we all know, the Nintendo Switch's online service sucks horse eggs compared to the Virtual Console, but with that being said, it is always fun when Nintendo adds new games, whether it be because we love the additions, find them interesting, or hate them so much that we enjoy roasting Nintendo over their choices. But no matter what they give us, Switch owners always seem to want a little bit more, which is why it's inevitable that Nintendo's gonna start rolling games out for more of their past consoles in the future. And if you've been following my channel for a while, then you'd know that I've already lent the above average sized Den a helping hand out of the kindness of my ass and covered which 20 games I should start things off with for literally every single Nintendo console that's ever been made. Well, you know, except for the Virtual Boy, of course, which doesn't even have 20 games period, let alone 20 good games. And then, of course, there's the good old 3DS, which I didn't bother getting around to because I didn't consider it a retro console. But seeing as how people have been asking me to go ahead and make the same video for the 3DS just for the sake of covering all of Nintendo's consoles, I figured I might as well go ahead and do it, seeing as how the 3DS is now officially dead, and technically that makes it a retro console. And like, yeah, I'd bet my dad's ass that Nintendo's never gonna bring 3DS games to the Switch, at least not through an online service anyway, but assuming they keep distributing classic games the same way they have, which they may or may not, then 3DS games are definitely inevitable, and obviously the problem with bringing 3DS games over to the Switch is that much like the original DS, there were quite a few gimmicks that make emulation rather difficult. I mean, nobody ever really used the 3D feature anyway, so that part doesn't really matter, I guess. And yeah, the Switch tablet does have touch controls, and you could just put both of the screens in the tablet and handheld mode like they did with DS games on the Wii U gamepad, which would be kinda lame since you'd pretty much only be able to play most of these games in handheld mode anyway, and probably buy a stylus separately too, no less. But seeing as how we're all paying for the Switch's online service just to play Splatoon and Smash anyway, I'll still take free 3DS games, even if playing them on the Switch may be a tad awkward, but luckily for this specific video, the 3DS kinda backed off on utilizing the gimmicks compared to the original DS, so this really shouldn't be as big of an issue as it was for that video. So with all that being said, make sure to crack open a can of expired fish milk, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, Latvia's #1 Zvaniaks, Cameron all one word, to tell you the 20 best 3DS games to kick things off with on the Nintendo Switch's online service. But just like all the other consoles I did this for, keep in mind that this is not a video on the top 20 3DS games, and I'm also trying to save Nintendo some goodies for future updates that they can make an impact with later on. And lastly, I'm choosing 20 games because that's what the NES and Super Nintendo catalog started off with. So without further ado, let's keep trucking along with number 1, Super Mario 3D Land. The 3DS might have officially launched months before this game came out, but seeing as how Steel Diver and Pilot Wings couldn't cut the mustard, the handheld just kinda sat in limbo waiting for the real launch to begin, which finally happened once Super Mario 3D Land hit the scene. A lot of people think the 3DS started selling because of the price cut that happened around the same time this game came out, and sure, that definitely helped, but at the same time, Mario 3D Land was bound to get 3DSs flying off the shelves, which is why putting it on Nintendo's online catalog of 3DS games right off the bat would be absolutely essential. Unlike most other 3D Mario games, aside from 3D World, which is pretty much a sequel to this game, 3D Land is basically what I originally expected Super Mario 64 to be. A straight-up 3D platformer that follows the concept of 2D Mario to a T, except with an extra dimension. You start off at point A, proceed forward while overcoming obstacles, and reach the end of the stage. Little to no fuss, little to no muss. And don't get me wrong, I personally prefer adventure-style 3D Mario myself, but I still think that Nintendo should make new 3D Mario games every now and then that use the formula that's easy for casuals to get into, but hard for anybody to master, because I honestly feel like it's different enough from games like Mario Odyssey and Galaxy to be considered its own separate thing. Regardless of whether or not Nintendo makes more of these kinds of 3D Mario games, though, I think it goes without saying that Super Mario 3D Land should definitely be kept alive, so for the sake of this video, I'm adding it to the 3DS's online catalog. Number 2, New Super Mario Bros. 2. Look, I know that 2D Mario games have kinda overstayed their welcome, mainly due to the fact that they all look and feel exactly the same, but even though I consider New Super Mario Bros. 2 on the 3DS to be the absolute worst core Mario game in the entire franchise, aside from Lost Levels, of course, which doesn't count, I still think it's a great game that anyone could have a ton of fun with, so if Nintendo likes to pretend that they're not jabronis, then I think that Nintendo ought to bring this game to their little online service. Number 3, Metroid Samus Returns. After years and years of people begging for a new 2D Metroid game, Nintendo finally delivered a remake of the Game Boy's Metroid 2 on my birthday, but since it was on the 3DS after the Switch already came out, nobody wanted to give it a chance, which I do kinda understand, but at the same time, what the hell, guys? Honestly, Nintendo should probably just give this game a full re-release on the Switch rather than just tossing it onto the online service, just so that the game can get a proper redo. But seeing as how most people are just gonna look at this game as old news, regardless of whether or not they've ever actually played it themselves, the above average sized Den might as well just go ahead and let everyone play this one for free and make a brand new 2D Metroid game. But if you've never played a 2D Metroid game before, then Samus Returns is as good a place to start as any if Nintendo does add it to the online service. But if you don't much care for eerie exploration-based shooter games with tons of puzzles, then frig it, there's 19 other games on here, you turkey. Number 4, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This might not be as good as Luigi's Mansion 1, but it's still pretty fun in its own right, and it's got the same ghost hunting spirit with twice the length. Personally, I prefer having one big house or building to explore rather than multiple stages that need to be selected separately, but I can still respect the fact that Nintendo was trying to make a game on a portable console more convenient to play in short bursts, and at the end of the day, the game turned out to be an original classic on the 3DS that deserves to live on forever. Number 5. Kirby Triple Deluxe. Alright, listen here, hotshot. You might think that you know everything about 2D Kirby, and, well, you probably do if I'm being honest. But you know what? Just because finishing these games is easier than scoring a date with my wife chili behind my back doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of fun to be had with these games. Because personally, sometimes I like a game that I can just play with my brain turned off, especially when there's as much fun, creativity, and charm as there is in Kirby Triple Deluxe. So frig it, pile it in the car, I say. Number 6. Yoshi's New Island. Yoshi's New Island might not have lit the world on fire by any means, but if you're into Yoshi's other 2D collectathons, then I'm pretty sure there's a lot of fun to be had here. To be honest, outside of 100%ing the first world, I've never really gotten around to this one myself, but as a full-grown boy who's literally 100%ed every other Yoshi game in the entire series, I've played enough of this one to know that it's at least in the same ballpark of quality as the others. The beauty of Yoshi's Island games is that they're ridiculously easy if all you're trying to do is beat every level and reach the end of the game, seeing as how Yoshi could pretty much float forever if you're decent at it, but it's pretty damn challenging if you're trying to collect everything in between, which is how the games are truly meant to be played, and honestly, I think that's a really clever alternative to just having separate easy and hard modes. Outside of the gameplay, though, the Yoshi's Island series is always full of charm, relaxing music, and fun for everyone in the entire family, except for that pesky uncle of yours who's doing time in the slammer. But you know what, seeing as how 3DS games are probably going to take many years to come to Nintendo's online service, this one would be a pretty good one to include so your uncle could finally play it when he gets out. As if they ever do let him out, of course, but you and I both know that he definitely deserves a rot. At least my uncle does, anyway. Number 7. Kid Icarus Uprising. Alright, so Kid Icarus Uprising is one of the few 3DS games that'd kinda be a hassle to play through emulation since the entire game's played with a stylus, but I suppose that converting the controls to analog sticks for an option to be very doable, seeing as I'd kinda make the game pretty much like Sin and Punishment. The ground stages might be a little more complicated than that, but all in all, the game's pretty fun, the dialogue and story are great, and regardless of whether or not this is truly an all-time classic, I think that the game still deserves a second chance at life someday, because if you ask me, I think there's still way too many people who never got around to playing it for whatever reason. Number 8. Fire Emblem Awakening. After years of nobody giving a poop about Fire Emblem, the franchise exploded once this game hit the scene, which may or may not have something to do with all those waifu mechanics that everyone seems to hate these days, but back then it was pretty cool to spruce one of the characters only for your kids to join the battle later on. And even though the 3DS came out after graphics and gaming reached the everything looks fine milestone, the Fire Emblem series has always been about the grid-based battle system and trying to come up with the best strategies possible to avoid permanently losing your characters, or, you know, losing characters to what you claim to be bullshit turns only to resurrect them by resetting the game. We've all done it, don't lie. Sure, Fire Emblem might not be for everybody, but if you're open to strategy RPGs, then the 3DS is definitely the best place to give this franchise a try, what with it having 4 core games in the series. And seeing as how Awakening was the first one to come to the 3DS, then I think that's the first one that should come to Nintendo's online service as well. Number 9. Mario Golf World Tour. Look, I know I put Mario Golf in all my other videos, and there's definitely better 3DS games to choose from, sure, but again, the point of this video isn't about which 3DS games are the best, but rather which ones are the best to start in the first wave of 20 games, and if we're getting 20 games all at once, then I honestly think it's better that some of them aren't epic adventures that are gonna require dozens of hours to play through, so why not add 1 or 2 lighthearted games that can be played in short bursts? But speaking of lighthearted games that can be played in short bursts, Number 10. Pushmo. I know this game never got a full retail release, so you might think that it's kind of a waste of a spot, but it was still made by the same people who make the Fire Emblem and Paper Mario games, and honestly, it's pretty damn fun if you ask me. The best way to describe Pushmo is that it's a 3D puzzle game that doesn't have any nudity, nor does it have any multiple endings or sexual themes, so basically it's an E-rated Catherine. Might not be the best 3DS game in the history of the universe, but since it's still fun in small bursts and most people haven't played it, I think it's perfect for the first wave of games. Number 11. Pikmin. Back in the day, hardcore Pikmin fans threw a fit over this game, because for some reason, they thought that a 2D Pikmin game meant that the 3D series would be permanently replaced or something like that should it succeed, but the thought of Pikmin 4 even being delayed by like 5 minutes over a 2D spin-off made by an entirely different group of people is just plain ridiculous, so I think fans overreacted a tad bit here, and to make matters worse, the game came out on the 3DS while the Switch was already out, which meant that pretty much no one was willing to give it a chance. And you know what, I think that's a damn shame, because even though Pikmin's definitely not as good in 2 dimensions as it is in 3, I still thought they did about as good a job with it as they could have for a fun little spin-off, and I think people would realize how much they missed out if it popped up on Nintendo's online service. Number 12. Codenamed Steam. People love getting mad at Intelligent Systems for trying new things in the Paper Mario franchise, but whenever they try and put new ideas into a brand new IP like codenamed Steam, nobody wants to give it the time of day. But you know what? That's fine, because all that means is that some people are going to think that this weird turn-based strategy game was specifically made for Nintendo's online service, thus creating more value. So hopefully I get a thank you letter from the above-average-sized den for reminding them that this game even exists. But speaking of people getting mad at Intelligent Systems for the Paper Mario series, number 13, Paper Mario Sticker Star. Alright, settle down. Yes, Paper Mario was better when the games were RPGs, and yeah, the sticker system with an inventory-based battle system isn't really ideal either, and I can go on and on about Sticker Star in general since I think it's the worst game in the entire series, but at the end of the day, I still think it's pretty good, especially if you can play it through an online service that you're already paying for anyway. Sadly, I don't think most people are going to give Sticker Star a fair shake until the series makes another 1,000-year door, and perhaps deservedly so, but I don't know, even at its worst, I still think Paper Mario's pretty fun. Number 14. Mario and Luigi Dream Team. One of the key reasons for Paper Mario games moving away from the RPG elements, outside of Miyamoto being a baby about his baby, of course, is because the Mario and Luigi games were already RPGs that sold millions of copies, but somehow almost nobody's ever actually played them. However, while they are totally different from the classic Paper Mario games, they're still a ton of fun in their own right if you're into RPGs, and since RPGs are long, that makes them perfect for being free games bundled into an online service. Number 15. Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Alright, at the risk of driving half my audience off, this is by far my all-time favorite Zelda game, mainly because it follows Breath of the Wild's idea of giving the player freedom to play the dungeons in any order they want, but instead of the game only giving you 4 items for the entire game, A Link Between Worlds gives you 9, which might make some people complain since you need these items to have access to the full map, but even though it does take a little longer to truly be able to go anywhere you want, the game's way better off for it, because it leads to a far wider variety of puzzles for you to solve, and even though this did lead to the actual dungeons themselves being linear on the inside, I honestly think that's the way that it should be. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that freedom and non-linearity aren't great or anything like that. In fact, that's why I love A Link Between Worlds so much in the first place. I just don't think that everything in a Zelda game needs to give the player complete freedom is all. At least not inside of the dungeons anyway, since I think they just flow way better when there's a little bit of structure to them. But regardless of where you place A Link Between Worlds in your Zelda tier list, I think that we could all agree that this is one damn fine video game that belongs in any 3DS collection. If I didn't just make you rage quit the video though, then let's keep things rolling along with the 5 obligatory third-party games that typically come with the Nintendo online services, or at least for the only ones we've had so far anyway. Number 16, Monster Hunter Stories. Alright, so I know there's way better Monster Hunter games on the 3DS, but seeing as how there's far superior versions of the core series on the Switch that I'm sure Capcom's making more money off of anyway, I feel like adding a spin-off would be a better, or at least more realistic choice. The difference with this and the main series is that rather than playing as a hunter, you play as a rider who befriends monsters, and the combat's all turn-based, with the story and graphical styles being a lot more on the lighthearted side, but the length of this game's nothing to sneeze at, so I think it'd bring a lot of value to the online service. Number 17, Jake Hunter, Ghost of the Dusk. I would have put an Ace Attorney game on here, but even though I do think that doing so could have led to more people buying the entire trilogy on the eShop, I honestly thought it'd be more fun to add a game that most people have probably never heard of before. I tried avoiding M-rated games since I doubt Nintendo would want to put them on the online service, which pretty much eliminates most of Axis's point-and-click 3DS games, but thankfully they managed to make a T-rated game somehow, because if you want variety on the 3DS, then that's definitely the developer to go to. Point-and-click games might not be for everybody, just like a lot of other games on this list, but as someone who used to hate point-and-click games myself, I must say that they've certainly come a long way since those dusty-ass ones on the PC, and seeing as how this game's somewhat rare for the 3DS, albeit not too expensive just yet, I think it's important that the game gets put right in front of people so they actually check it out. Otherwise, I kind of feel bad for all the developers who worked so hard on this game. I said hard on. Number 18, Bravely Default. Alright, so even though I love the first half of this game, the second half is absolute pure garbage for making you essentially beat all the bosses like 10 or 12 more times. And to make matters worse, there's also microtransactions that help you win battles as well, which might make you wonder why I'm including this game in the first place, but to be honest, I'm just trying to be realistic here, since I kind of feel like Nintendo could get it pretty easily, seeing as how Bravely Default 2's on the Switch. And, you know, the first half of the game was fun, so, you know, why not, I guess. Number 19, Fantasy Life. Alright, so I'd imagine that Nintendo would never want to give an Animal Crossing game away on their online service, because I'm sure that doing so would lead to fewer people buying and playing New Horizons. But if you really want one of those kinds of games on the online service, then Fantasy Life would probably be your next best bet. It's pretty much like an Animal Crossing game in the sense that the gameplay revolves around building a house and just living, but rather than sitting around on a porch like a goon pretending to use items that you bought, you actually have to fight monsters here, and I'd imagine that this game would appeal to a lot of people, especially for free. Number 20, Yokai Watch. The first time I visited Japan in 2013, I was really surprised to see that this game was even more popular over there than Pokemon somehow, so naturally, I was pretty excited to play it for myself once the game finally made its way to the States. But even though I absolutely loved just about everything about this game, I thought that the battle system was just plain horrendous, and sadly, this ruined the entire experience for me. As opposed to Pokemon, where you make all the decisions for your creatures in battle, Yokai Watch just lets the yokais do all the work, with the players sort of just coaching them along and giving them a general idea of what to do. Kinda feels like the original version of Persona 3, except here, you don't even get to control your main character. But even though the Yokai Watch party might have drastically died down, the first game was what led to the franchise exploding in the first place, so it might be a good idea for Level 5 to give the game away through Nintendo's online service, even though the IP isn't an exclusive to them anymore. And again, even though I did hate the battle system enough to not bother finishing the game, I really do think that everything else about it was incredibly cool, and seeing as how the game was an ass hair away from being the new Pokemon, I just can't help but shake the feeling that giving it away for free just might lead to the game, along with Nintendo's online service being a big deal. And if not, then oh well, still wouldn't be the most random game on Nintendo's service, so if you ask me, I think it's worth taking a chance. But anyway, that's my list. Much like Nintendo's other handhelds I covered, I'm sure people are probably going to be irate that I left Pokemon games off of here, but not only would two versions of one game be confusing for this type of a service, but I was also trying to be semi-realistic since I can't really imagine a scenario where Game Freak would essentially give two Pokemon games away for free given how much they love money. And sure, Mario Kart 7 and Smash 4 are two of the best 3DS games of all time, but again, this isn't a video on the top 20 3DS games, so seeing as how those two titles in particular were more or less just incomplete versions of Mario Kart 8 and Smash Ultimate, I just kind of figured that adding them to the Switch's online service would be like giving Dolly Parton boobs. But aside from the games I just mentioned, what'd you think of my selection? Was it a good way to start things off? Did I miss certain games? Are you furious I didn't include any ports? Am I silly for even speculating on something Nintendo's never gonna do in the first place? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody at some point. And if you want to see more videos like this, then make sure to check out all the other ones that I made for literally every other Nintendo console to date. But let me tell you, if there's two 3DS games you should definitely be ported over to the Nintendo Switch, then it would absolutely be today's patrons of the day, Senate Viking and Advance AU. If you want to be badasses like these two, then consider supporting FU Game Crew on Patreon for loot boxes and silly rewards in the mail. Send pictures or videos of you rocking merch if you want to make cameos in my videos, and follow me on Twitch if you ever want to hang out whenever I play video games sometimes. My name's Cameron, all one word, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.